my name is Erica. I'm with the Tennessee Department of Safety and Homeland Security CDL Division. Today, I'll be showing you how to conduct a typical pre-trip inspection, as outlined in the CDL manual. Please note, all vehicle inspection tests include an engine start, an in-cab inspection, and an inspection of the coupling system. Then, your test may require an inspection of the entire vehicle or only a portion of the vehicle, which your CDL examiner will explain to you. Now, I will show you how to conduct a full pre-trip inspection on a tractor trailer. All right, first I'm going to check underneath the vehicle, make sure that there are no leaks. Any puddles on the ground would give me indication that there are dripping fluids. After, I'm going to come up and check my lights and my reflectors. I'm going to check all my lights, make sure that they are clean, functional, none are broken or missing. These are my low beams and my high beams. Then I'm going to check my four-way flashers, my left turn signal, my right turn signal. They are not cracked, not damaged. They are clear and they're amber in color. I'm also going to check my clearance lights at the top for the very same thing. They're all present, they're not cracked, damaged, missing, and they're all amber in color. On my passenger side, I will check my coolant reservoir. I'm going to check that the level is adequate. It's between the add and full. Then I'm going to move on to my water pump. I will confirm that my water pump is mounted securely, not loose, and not leaking. It is belt driven, so I would check the belt, make sure that if I tug on it, it doesn't give me more than a 1/2 inch to 3/4 inches of play. And I'm also going to check that the belt has no cracks, frays, loose fibers, or signs of wear. On the driver's side, I'm going to check my engine oil. I'm going to pull out the dipstick, clean it off with a towel, put it back in, pull it back out, and check to make sure that the fluid is between add and full. Next, I'm going to check my dipstick for my power steering fluid. I'll do the same thing, pull out the dipstick, wipe it off, put it back in, pull it out, and make sure that it is between add and full. After, I'll check my power steering pump. My power steering pump is gear driven, so I will ensure that it is operating properly and is not damaged or leaking and mounted securely. Next, I will check my alternator. I will check that it is securely mounted and that all wires are securely fastened. It is belt driven with a serpentine belt, so I would check the belts, make sure that there are no cracks, frays, loose fibers, or signs of wear. And if I were to tug on it, it would give me no more than a 1/2 inch to 3/4 inch of play. Next, I'm going to check my air compressor, which is all the way in the back here. It is quite hard to see. It is securely mounted and not leaking. It is gear driven, so I'm just going to check that it's operating properly and it is not damaged or leaking. Next, I'm going to check my steering box and hoses. So first, I'll check the steering box, ensure that it is securely mounted and not leaking. I'm going to look for any missing nuts and or bolts, and I'll make sure that there are no leaks for the power steering fluid and there is no damage to any of the power steering hoses. Next, I'm going to check my steering linkage. I'll check that all connecting links, arms, and rods from the steering box to the wheel are not worn or cracked. I'll check all of the joints and sockets to make sure that they're not worn or loose and that there are no missing nuts, bolts, or cotter keys. Next, I'll move on to my suspension. I'll start with my leaf springs. I'm going to check for any missing, shifted, or cracked, or broken springs. And I'm also going to check my shock absorber, make sure that it is securely mounted and there are no leaks. Next, I'll check my spring mounts. I'm going to look for any cracked or broken hangers. I'm going to check for any missing or damaged bushings and look for any broken, loose, or missing bolts. Next, I'll check for any broken, loose, or missing U-bolts. All right, next I'm going to check my slack adjuster and push rod. I'll make sure that the slack adjuster is securely mounted, and I'll check for any broken, loose, or missing parts. On the push rod, with the brakes released, if I were to pull it on with my hand, it should not move more than 1 inch. Next, I'll check the brake chamber, make sure that the brake chamber is not leaking, cracked, or dented, and it is mounted securely. I'll check the clamps to make sure there are no loose or missing clamps. After that, I'll check the hoses, make sure that there are no cracked, worn, or leaking hoses, lines, and couplings. Next, I'm going to check my brake drum and linings. I'll check to make sure that there are no cracks, dents, or holes. I'm also going to check for any loose or missing bolts. I'll check for any contaminants, such as debris or oil and grease. And my brake linings should not be worn dangerously thin. Next, I'm going to check my tires. I'm going to check for a minimum tread depth of 4/32 on my steering axle. I'm going to check that my tread is evenly worn, and I'm going to look for cuts or other damage on my tread or my sidewalls. I'm going to make sure that my valve cap and stem are not missing, broken, or damaged, and I would check my inflation of my tire by using a tire gauge. Next, I'll move on to my rims. Make sure that my rims are not damaged or bent. They cannot have any welding repairs on them. I will also check for any rust trails that may indicate that the rim is loose on the wheel. Next, I'll move on to my lug nuts. I'm going to check that all my lug nuts are present, free of cracks and distortions. I want to make sure that there are no signs of looseness, such as rust trails or shiny threads. I'm going to make sure that none of my bolt holes are cracked or distorted. Then I'll move on to my hub oil seal. As you can see, I have a cover, but I'm just going to make sure that it's not leaking. If I had a sight glass, I would just check that my oil level was adequate. Next, I'll move down the truck and I'm going to check my lights. This is my left turn signal, my right turn signal, my four-way flasher light. I'll make sure that it is clean, functional, and it's not broken or missing. And it's also the proper color, which is clear. Next, I'll move on to my door. Check that my door is not damaged, and I will check that it opens and closes properly from the outside. Once I open it, I will check that my hinges are intact and secure, and I'll make sure that all of my seals around the entirety of the door are intact with no cuts or frays. On the outside of the door, I'm going to check my mirror and my mirror bracket. I'll check that my brackets are not damaged and are mounted securely with no loose fittings. Then I'll move on to my fuel tank caps and make sure that my fuel tank is secure, my cap is tight, and there are no leaks coming from either the tanks or any of the lines. I will also check my DEF tank, make sure that it has at least 1/8 of a tank so that I can safely make my trip. Next, I'll move on to my steps leading up to the cab. I'll ensure that my steps are secure, they are properly mounted, and it's free of debris so that I can safely make my way up the steps and climb back down. That brings me over to my catwalk, which I'm going to check that my catwalk is solid, it's clear of any objects, there's no wires hanging, and it's securely bolted to the tractor frame. After, I'll look inside and I'm going to check my drive shaft. I'm going to make sure that my drive shaft is not bent or cracked, it is straight, and the U-joints on either side of the drive shaft are secure and free of any foreign objects. On the passenger side, I'll check my exhaust system for damage and signs of leaks, which would be indicated by rust or carbon soot. My exhaust system should not have any cracks, holes, or severe dents, and I want to make sure it is connected tightly and mounted securely. Next, as I move down the vehicle, I'll be checking the frame. I'll look for any cracks, broken welds, or other damage to both the longitudinal frame members and the cross members. After, I'll move on to my rear tires. I will check my inflation, make sure that I've got a minimum tread depth of 2/32 on my rear axle, and I'll make sure that my tread is evenly worn. I'll look for cuts or other damage to the tread and the sidewalls. I will check my valve caps and stems the same way that I did in the front, and I would check my inflation by using a tire gauge. My rims, I would check my rims the same way that I did in the front. I would check my lug nuts the same way that I did in the front, and I would check my axle seal by making sure that there are no leaks. While I'm back here, I'm also going to check the bud spacing to make sure that there is no debris or foreign objects between my tires so that they can turn. While I'm down here, I'm going to check my suspension components. So first, I'm going to check my leaf springs the same way that I would in the front. I'm going to check my spring hangers the same way that I would in the front. I'm also going to check my shock the same way that I would in the front. The only difference back here is that I do have an airbag. So I'm going to make sure that my airbag is securely mounted. There's no cuts, damage, or bulges, and it is not leaking. I'm also going to check my airbag mounts, make sure that it is securely mounted to the frame and that it's not missing any nuts, bolts, or bushings. The other item that I'm going to check down here are my U-bolts, and I would check those the same way that I did in the front. Now I'll move on to my brake system. First, I'll check my slack adjuster and push rod the same way that I did in the front. Then I'll check my brake chamber the same way that I did in the front, as well as my brake lines. I'll check those the same that I did in the front. After that, I'll move on to my drum and linings, check those the same way that I did in the front. Moving to the rear of the vehicle, I'm going to start by checking my splash guards. I'm going to make sure that they are mounted securely, not damaged, and that's all I need to look for. In the back of the vehicle, I'm going to check my lights. These act as my left turn signal, my right turn signal, my four-way flashers, my tail lights, and my brake lights. I'm going to make sure that all of my lights are clean, functional, and they're not broken. They are also the correct color, which is red. Finally, the last item behind my truck is my torque arm. I'm going to make sure that it is properly secured and not damaged. I'm going to come to the coupling now. I'm going to start with my air and electric lines. So first I'll start with my air lines. I'm going to listen for any air leaks. I'm going to make sure that all my air hoses and electric lines are not cut, chafed, spliced, or worn. Make sure that my air and electric lines are not tangled, they're not pinched, and they're not dragging against any parts of the tractor. I'm going to check that all of my trailer air connectors are sealed and in good condition, check my glad hands for that. And I'm going to check that all my glad hands are locked in place, free of damage, and there are no air leaks. Then I'm going to check that my electrical plug is firmly seated and locked in place. Next, I'm going to move to my apron, which is the under part of my trailer here. I will make sure that that apron is not bent, cracked, or broken. The next thing I want to make sure is that there is no gap. My trailer is lying flat on my fifth wheel skid plate, and I can't see any daylight between the two. After that, I'm going to actually check the fifth wheel skid plate itself. I'll make sure that it's properly lubricated and that the fifth wheel skid plate is securely mounted to the platform and that all bolts and pins are secure and not missing. The next item I'm going to check is my platform. I'm going to check for any cracks or breaks in the platform structure, which supports my fifth wheel. Because I do have a sliding fifth wheel, I'm going to have to check my sliding fifth wheel pins and make sure that there are no loose or missing pins in the slide mechanism. Because it is air powered, I'm going to need to check that that air line does not have any leaks, and I want to make sure that all of my locking pins are fully engaged. I also, because it is sliding, want to make sure that my fifth wheel is positioned properly. I do want to make sure that when my truck turns, there's enough room between my landing gear and the rear of my truck, which is called the clearance. Next, I'll be checking the mounting bolts. I'll make sure that there are no loose or missing mounting brackets, clamps, bolts, or nuts. I'm going to make sure that both the fifth wheel and the slide mounting are solidly attached. Next, I'll check my release arm and safety latch. I'm going to make sure that my release arm is in the engaged position and the safety latch is internal and it is in place. After, I'll move around to the back of the truck. Underneath the trailer, I'm going to look for my kingpin. I'm going to make sure that my kingpin is not bent or damaged and that my locking jaws are holding my kingpin in place. On the locking jaws, I'm going to make sure that they are fully enclosed around the kingpin. Next, I'm going to check the front of my trailer, just to make sure that it's free of damage. Then I'm going to move on to my front clearance light. I'm just going to make sure that it is clean, functional, it's not broken or missing, and it is the correct color, which is amber. Next, I'm going to move on to my side, which acts as my left turn signal, my right turn signal, and my four-way flasher. I'm going to make sure that these are all clean, functional, none are broken or missing, and they are the correct color, which are amber. Next, I'm going to move on to my reflector tape condition, make sure that it is properly secured to the side of my trailer and it covers the full side of my trailer. As I move down my trailer, the next item I'm going to check is my landing gear. I'm going to check that my landing gear is fully raised, has no missing parts, and that the crank handle is secure, and that the support frame and landing pads are not damaged. As I move down, I'm also going to be checking the frame of the trailer. I'll look for cracks, broken welds, holes, or any other damage to both the frame, cross members, box, and floor. Next, I'll check the ties that run along the side of my trailer. I'll make sure that all of my ties are secure. As I move down my truck, I'm going to check my rear axle. I'm going to check for a minimum tread depth of 2/32. I'm going to check the condition of my tire, make sure that it has proper wear, it is evenly worn. I'm going to check that there are no cuts on the sidewall or the tread. I'm also going to check my valve cap and stems, which are in the inside of my tires, the same way that I would check my valve cap and stems on my other tire. I would also check my inflation of my tire by using a tire gauge. I'll check that there is no debris between my tires and that it is properly spaced. Moving on to the outside of the tire, I'll check the rim the same way that I would in the front. I'll check all of my lug nuts the same way that I would in the front. I will check my hub oil seal the same way that I would in the front, looking for leaks, and because I do have a sight glass, I'm going to make sure that it's at an adequate level. The next item I'm going to check is my ABS light. I'm going to make sure that it is clear, it is functional, it's not broken or damaged in any way, it's not missing, and it is the proper color, which is amber. Next, on my rear axle, I'm going to inspect my suspension components. I'm going to inspect my leaf springs the same way that I would on the front. I don't have any airbags and I don't have any shocks. If I did, I would check those the same way that I did on the front. I would check my leaf spring hangers the same way that I did on the front. I would check my torsion arm the same way that I did with my torque arm, making sure that it's not damaged and it is properly secured. I'll also check my U-bolts the same way that I did on the front. Now I'm going to move on to my braking components. I'm going to check my slack adjuster and push rod the same way that I would on the front. I'm going to check my brake chamber the same way that I would on the front. I'm going to check my brake lines and hoses the same way that I would on the front. And I'm going to check my drum and linings the same way that I would on the front. The final item I'll check before moving on to the rear of my trailer are my splash guards. I'll make sure that they're not damaged and are mounted securely. On the rear of my trailer, I'm going to check my lights, which function as my left turn signal, my right turn signal, my four-way flasher, my taillights, my brake lights, and in the middle are my clearance lights. I'm going to ensure that they are clean, functional, and none are broken or missing, and they're also the proper color, which is red. After, I'm going to check my ramps. I want to make sure that my ramps are secure, they are properly stowed, they are able to open and close, they're not missing any nuts, bolts, or bushings. Next, it's time for the external light operations check. At this point, I'd ask my examiner to stand outside in the front and in the rear as I check my lights. I'll turn on my left turn signal, my right turn signal, my four-way flashers. In the front, I'll turn on my headlights, my high beams, and my clearance lights. Once I've finished in the front, I'll ask them to go to the back. I'll turn on my left turn signal, my right turn signal, my four-way flashers, and my running lights or tail lights, and I'd apply my brakes to check my brake lights. Getting into my cab, first I'll check my safety belt. I will make sure that it is mounted securely, it adjusts, it latches properly, and it is not ripped or frayed. Next, I'm going to check for all my emergency equipment. My 6 spare fuses are above me. My fire extinguisher is to my left, and it is properly charged and mounted securely. And my 3 reflective triangles are stored under my seat. Next, I'm going to safe start the vehicle. So I will depress the clutch with my left foot, make sure that I'm in neutral, and I will turn the vehicle on. And slowly depressing the clutch as it reaches idling speed. Now I'm going to allow my air to build to governor cutout. As I do so, I'm going to check my gauges. First, I'll be checking my temperature gauge. It is rising to normal operating level. I'll check my oil pressure gauge. It's also rising to normal operating level. I'm going to check my air gauges, ensure that they are rising to operating level, and I'm waiting for them to reach governor cutout, which will occur anywhere between 120 to 140 psi. I will also check my voltmeter to ensure that my battery is charging. I'll check my DEF gauge to make sure that I have enough fuel to make my trip, and as I start my vehicle, I will check for the ABS light to come on and then promptly turn off to ensure that it's working properly. I'll check my lighting indicators. I'll check my left turn signal, my right turn signal, my four-way flashers, and my high beams. The next item I'm going to check are my horns, make sure that they're operating correctly. I'll check my city horn and my air horn. Then I'm going to check my heater and my defroster, make sure that it is blowing hot air above and below. Next, I'm going to check my windshield, make sure that it's clear. There's no cracks, damage, or anything that would impede, or any illegal stickers. I'm also going to check my mirrors on both sides, make sure that they're clean and they are adjusted to me so that I can see out. Next, I'm going to check my windshield wipers, make sure that they are secure, not damaged, and operate smoothly. And I'm going to check my fluid, make sure that I have enough fluid to clean my windshield. My next test is that I'm going to test my parking brakes. First, I will check the parking brake. I'll push in my trailer parking brake, put it in a low gear, and lightly tug against it by slightly pressing the accelerator, just to make sure that my parking brake holds. Next, I'm going to do the same thing with my trailer parking brake. So I'll push in my truck brake, pull out my trailer parking brake, put it in a low gear, and slightly tug against it to make sure that the brake holds. And that's my brake test. Next, I'll explain how I would conduct my service brake test. First, I would make sure that my vehicle's in a low gear. I would pull forward at 5 miles per hour and lightly apply the service brake to make sure that my steering wheel isn't going to pull to one side or the other. So next, I'll be conducting my air brake check. I'll start my vehicle to build it up to governor cutout, which is 120 to 140 psi. Once I let my air build, what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off my truck, leave the key in the on position so that all of my dash items still work. I'll push in my parking brake for my trailer and my truck, and then I'll do 3 parts to my air brake check. I will first do a 1-minute hold. This is where I'll hold down my brake for 1 full minute, 60 seconds, to ensure that I do not lose more than 4 pounds of air pressure. And then I will start to pump down my air, and at 55 psi or above, my warning lights and buzzers should come on to indicate that I have low air. After that, I will continue to pump down my brakes, and my valves, my parking brake, my trailer supply, should both pop out. I've just reached governor cutoff, so now I'm going to turn the vehicle off, leaving the key in the on position. I'm going to push in my parking and my trailer air supply valves. I'm going to allow my air gauges to settle. Once my air gauges settle, I'm going to hold down for 1 minute. I can ask my examiner to time me. So Examiner, my gauges have settled. Please time me for 1 minute. Now that my minute is up and I have not lost more than 4 pounds of air pressure, I'm going to pump my brakes down until I hear my warning lights and buzzers. As you can see, my lights have activated and I have got a warning that my air pressure is low. So at this point, I'm going to continue to pump down, and at about 40 psi, I should have my valves, my parking brake, and my trailer air supply valves pop out. There's my trailer air supply, and there's my parking brake. And that's how you conduct the air brake test. The CDL skills test is outlined and explained in the CDL driver's manual. Review Chapter 11 for the vehicle inspection, Chapter 12 for the basic control skills test, and Chapter 13 for the road test. The most current CDL manual is always available at tn.gov/safety. Once you have completed the vehicle inspection, inform your examiner that you are finished. Your examiner may verify at that point that you are ready to move on to the basic control skills test. Once you indicate you are finished, your score will be submitted and no changes can be made to your test.